Well, welcome back. This is How Real Estate Changed My Life podcast. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts up to this point, they've all been about visiting with people from all walks of life as far as real estate investing. We're talking single family home, apartment, syndicators, short-term rentals, lenders, insurance guys, anybody that can go back and say real estate has changed my life one way or the other, or even if it's a small little bit. And I recently came across a gentleman that I relatively just recently met through my neighborhood and my network, and turned out he's buying real houses too. So he's got a little different story than everybody else that we've talked to up to this point. But Joseph, here he is, and I think he's got a good story. He's a little bit earlier in the game than most of the people I've visited with, which I think's great because I don't want people to be um, turned off or have an excuse because they don't know how to start. And because most people I've talked to, they're already there. Like they've got a good portfolio or they've done several. And I think it's really good to get some people in here that are still early in the game and they can kind of tell you what was good and bad in their experience. So with that being said, here's Joseph. Joseph, introduce yourself because I didn't do a really good job.
Well, no, thank you, Kyle. First, I want to thank you for just having me on. I
Sure.
appreciate the invite. Yeah, my name is Joseph Fiddelke. Grew up in Iowa, moved to Texas. I was told when we moved here I couldn't be a true Texan until I lived here 10 years, so I hit that mark a while ago.
Good.
So I can be a true Texan now.
Do you have a Texas flag on
But
your house?
no, we still have the Iowa State Cyclone flag for
Oh
football.
yeah, that's all right.
But my wife and I both went to Iowa State, but we moved to Texas for jobs, careers. In Iowa, you're going to be insurance or work in the field. So that's kind of the two options that were presented. But yeah, I worked in medical apparel for about 7 years. I worked in a corporate office here in Coppell, Texas. And I got to the point where it was just, I had a child, my second one along the way a few years later. And I decided, I can either do this for the next 20 years or I can change how I want to basically go about my business, and that was spend more time with the kids, but yet still build a future for them.
Yeah.
I really didn't start thinking about. I always wanted to buy a house and do the rental thing, but it never really hit me until I had a child, and it was just all the time at the office, away from them, and daycare, and my wife and I both had corporate jobs, so when we both were in meetings, a child would be sick. Who was going to go pick them up? We have no family here, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
Everybody's in Iowa. So it became this like, okay, whose meeting's more important today? Who's going to have to skip? And it really just became this struggle of what takes priority.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to leave a generational wealth to my kids. And I feel like buying houses can do that. And not only that, but they're already involved. Our second house we bought last year, I had my son out raking leaves and pulling weeds while we were inside working.
Mhm.
So for him, he's already kind of learning the business. He doesn't know it yet, but he's understanding that, this isn't our house. Somebody else lives here and they pay us money for that.
Yeah. So you left corporate world. You're all in now. Like this is what I guess you.
Yeah, my wife has a W-2 job. She's a sales engineer. And then we started this business last year. We bought two houses last year. And I left my corporate world job to do this. And it really freed up my time to, one, do this. And then two, when the kids are in need, I can be there for them.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You want to go right now, or do you feel like you would need to go faster, or what's your story on that?
Honestly, I'd love to go as fast as I could.
Mhm.
I'm always looking for the next deal. It's just, yeah, it's I want to buy the next house as fast as possible, but we're just looking for those deals. We're currently just buying houses in Keller, Texas. And my two houses are 5 minutes from me. So for me, it was you and I had talked about expanding that network or going out further. But a book that I read that I really loved was Building Wealth One House at a Time by John Schaub. And he really talks about staying local. Local could be 30 minutes away. Local could be 10 minutes away. It's whatever you want. But I really like staying local for the fact that I know what's going on in my own neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a lot of books out there, a lot of teachers that say, hey, this is the way to invest, this is the way to invest, this is the way, and everybody's got a different thing. None of them are wrong. It's like whatever fits
Right.
you is what makes sense. So what you've got working for you makes sense for you. That's perfect. Because there's no such thing as a one formula matches everybody's needs and what you're looking for.
Yeah, and before I started buying the houses, I read a lot of books. So that was just one that resonated with me. But I've read a lot of them just because I'm one of those guys. I like to do a lot of analysis. I left my career as a director of gross margin, so I did a lot of analysis. And I like to, before I jumped in, kind of get a feel for what I was getting into. But until you do it, you just don't know. So I just finally kicked it into gear and just said, let's just do it, buy this first house, get a company going. And
So what hesitation did you have, if any, when you started? Like, what was there anything that's like, okay, I'm going to make an offer on this house? Like, how many houses did you look at? And then what did it feel like when you made your first offer? And just kind of tell us the whole story about how that all went.
yeah, sure. There wasn't much hesitation when we decided to go all in.
Mhm.
Once I left my career, that next month we bought a house. So, and we had always been, for that year, I was really looking at houses in the market. So it's not like I jumped in and didn't know. We were keeping an eye on the market. We had looked at houses. But once I left my career, I really just jumped in, and we just, once every day I'm jumping on, Zillow or whatever, just looking at houses around me and running analysis. I've got a little Excel that I run them in and see if it was be a good deal or not. But before that, before children, the hesitation was as well, I can just keep doing my corporate job and make good money. Why would I want to risk that? Yeah, the easy paycheck, right? Though it's a guaranteed paycheck as long as I got a job.
Yeah, it is. But when you get a bunch of houses, that's kind of almost a guaranteed paycheck too, as long as you run it
Right.
right.
And it's the control of your over your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, the goal would be my goal is to get to 10 houses. Maybe I get there, maybe I don't, but the goal is to get to 10. And once I'm to 10, maybe I want to get to 20.
Yeah.
After buying that first house, man, the adrenaline, it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed fixing it up. I enjoyed having teams there getting it fixed up. I enjoyed talking to potential tenants. I mean, I enjoyed every step of it. And then once you get the tenant, it's exciting, have them sign a lease. I mean, all of it. It was just exciting because it was me doing it for my business.
Yeah, it's for your business. That's a good way of looking at it. So has anything changed as far as like life, as far as anxiety or control? Do you feel like you control your life more than you did previously, or?
Absolutely. My days are less filled in corporate meetings and more focused on what I want to be focused on, whether that day one of the kids is sick and I'm taking care of them, or I'm just very deep in Excels trying to figure out the next buy, or I get a call from a tenant and need some AC fix, but it's on my terms. I'm not doing anything that's not on my terms anymore.
Right. Kind of different, isn't it? So
Yeah.
has anything changed in what you're looking for? Because you bought one, now you've got two. Has anything changed in what you're looking for? Like, is your buying criteria changed, or have you
Oh
opened?
yeah. From
Maybe I've
the
opened
first house
this
to
or
the
that.
second, from the first house to the second, we already know what works and what doesn't based on just two houses. And I'll learn more if I buy 3, 4, 5. Our first one has a pool, our second one doesn't. There's differences even with that.
Yeah.
So I mean, just little things like that, and where you're buying too. Even within Keller, there's different spots of Keller that are different.
Yeah. What are you looking to accomplish out of the ones you purchase? Is it cash flow? Is it appreciation? Is it just convenient? What is it you're looking for?
What we're looking for, we're trying to do the buy and hold. It's long-term rentals. We're not doing Airbnbs. And what I mentioned is I would like to hold them for 20 plus years and either pass the business or the homes to the children and give them a chance at life and really a chance at maybe doing something like what I'm doing where they can work for a business that's their own.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm sure I've mentioned it in prior podcasts, but I'm a big believer that the generation below us, our children, they're going to have a lot harder time getting ahead than the generations ahead of us, or yeah,
Right.
prior to us. And so I think we're going to have to help them, either guide them a little bit more than maybe the generation ahead of us did for us, or we're going to have to help get them into a business or help them get into a house, because I think it's just going to get harder and harder on them. So yeah, I'm glad that you're looking ahead for that and for your children.
Yeah, I always liked, my dad worked at Land O'Lakes. I went to his plant all the time and he was showing me stuff there, but it wasn't his business. You know what I mean? Like he worked there 30 years and retired, got his pension and all that, but it wasn't something he could pass down. It wasn't like Land O'Lakes was going to hire me to be a manager because he was.
And so I wrote down a couple of questions to kind of keep me going on this. We talked about what you had changed as far as how your buying criteria. What challenges have you had with the first two rentals so far, if any? Like you're pretty early, so you might not have hit any road bumps yet, but what challenges?
Oh, no, actually, AC went out the second week on our first house. So, I mean,
Oh,
that was a big hurdle as far as like, I wasn't expecting that the second week.
yeah.
But we got people in there, got it fixed. So
Well, and you had a connection. Your wife's in that industry, right? Did she?
yes.
get you taken care of on that? Because that's usually like
She's
a,
more commercial and less residential. So I mean
yeah,
that connection's there, but it wasn't her buying the equipment.
yeah.
She had to call another department to help get that residential unit.
Well, that's a good connection to have because that whole HVAC thing that is huge in rental properties because a lot of people are like, well, you get a home warranty. Well, home warranties they don't really work with tenants. Like they it's just a fiasco,
They
and they aren't in a sense of urgency or in a hurry to get you taken care of. And they do it I mean, Band-Aid would be the best case scenario for them. Like they just do what the minimum, and they don't even have really high skilled people. So that's
we dealt with
a
that
challenge.
too. When we bought the house, our first house, we got the home warranty package.
Mhm.
So we ended up calling that home warranty. And I literally determined after the first day, it was more cost effective for me to just handle it myself than to even go through them.
Oh, and I don't want to get too much on a tangent, but the home warranty companies, I've done the math. It doesn't work. It's not good
Right.
for you. And the people that they employ to come out and service your house, they pay them so little, and they're
Hmm.
so like these guys, like they're starting, like best case scenario, they're starting their industry. Like they don't even know what they don't know yet, and they get paid nothing. And so they're trying to ding you up with anything like, oh, well, you need to do this extra.
Right.
Warranty doesn't cover this, but it'll do that. Like, you got to pay for this.
Mhm.
And so I've had crazy stories where, like, I had a home warranty when it just came to the house, water heater went out, and that water heater was covered under the home warranty. The plumber came out, looked at it. It's like, good news, you're getting a brand new water heater. I'm like, great, put it in. They're like, you just have to give me $1,200. I'm like, no, 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 no. Talk about the warranty company. They're paying for this. I'm like, no, 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 no. They'll pay for the water heater, but you're gonna have to pay $1,200 because I'm gonna have to raise it
Install it, take
off
it
the
out.
ground. I'm gonna have to do this new
Yeah.
pipe. I'm gonna have to do all this to bring it to code. And I'm like, you can do that, but that's not $1,200. Like,
Right.
talk about it, but that's not $1,200. Is in the garage. And he started yelling at me about because I told him that's like a ridiculous number. And he would start yelling at me on the phone. I'm like, dude, just get off my property. Like, just like, don't worry about it. And so I went straight to the warranty company and said, hey, what they'll do is they gave me the dollar amount that they would have paid for the water heater, which was actually pretty low, but it really didn't matter because what happened is my handyman went over, yanked it out, went to Home Depot with it. It was still under manufacturer's warranty. I don't know how he did all this. I got a new water heater. They just swapped it out and gave me a new one. So I just had to pay my maintenance guy to connect that thing up. And then
Right.
the warranty company finally, it took, I think, like 5 months for them to finally, because I had to hound them to get my money.
Yep.
It was double of what I paid my maintenance guy to just do all that. So I made money on it, but it was such a fiasco. And when you look at how much you pay for a home warranty,
Hmm.
and what it costs just to replace a dishwasher, it's like better just to self-insure, like just keep that money and
Yep.
replace
Yeah.
something.
When we bought our second house, we didn't even, they were like, do you want the home warranty like on the house? I was like, no, not at all.
Just credit me that amount at closing or something.
So to your point, I learned already on the second house. That was one thing I learned real quick. I don't need that.
Yeah. I know, and so many people swear by it, but I get it. It takes I guess they kind of say it kind of makes home buyers comfortable with buying a house, or maybe it takes a little
Right.
liability off of a salesperson, somebody selling the house, maybe. I don't know, but
If
yeah,
you're the homeowner, sure. Like, I mean, when the AC went out, like to your point, the tenant, they're hot.
yeah,
You know, it's 110 here in Texas. It's like they can't wait for home warranty. I got so you just gotta. It's different. If it's
yeah.
my house, okay, maybe I figure it out. But when the tenant's paying you to be there, you got to figure it out fast.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when your AC goes out, like you deal with it because you just know life happens and you got to get the guy over
Right.
in a couple days. Tenants, they don't care. Like it's just a
Yeah.
different thing, and you're like,
Yeah. What I ended up doing was getting one of those portable ACs at Home Depot and bringing it over there for the days that it took to get somebody out there,
yeah,
just to give them something.
yeah. Well, call me next time because I think I've got a few dozen of those things in my warehouse. Just
Well, I
you
got one
never
now,
know.
so
Yeah, well, we
start
had
my
a
own
whole
little
apartment
warehouse.
complex that we managed, we still do, that their chiller system went down, and so we just threw window units into every one of those things while we were getting all that set up. So I've got dozens of those things. So it's just one of those things. You want to have all the stuff. The thing is, you have to be prepared because you just never know when things are going to hit. If it's space heaters, AC units, whatever. So.
Yep. Well, and not being at that corporate job, I was able to just be on that and get taken care of that day. Where
Yeah.
if I'd have been at work, it'd have been after work, or it would have been hard. It'd have
That
been a
was a good
little
point.
bit different.
I was going to mention that because you're able to, let's say when you're renting your house, you're able to show up to show the house to a potential tenant. And somebody, if you
Yeah,
had a regular job, you wouldn't have really been able to be that
I'll
accommodating.
say something too on our second house. We tried something new, and I don't know if it's new in the industry or not, but we had an open house, and we actually had people show up to
Wow.
a rental.
Mhm.
Never thought in a million. I thought I'd be sitting there 6 hours by myself, and we had somebody in there every hour looking at it, and it might just been snoopers or just
Yeah.
someone wanting to see. But we actually had people in there and filling out names
Well,
and
even if they're snoopers, they talk to people. So,
right.
and what people don't know that are maybe watching this or listening to this episode is you're in Keller, Texas, which is a highly desirable community to live in for multiple reasons: the location, the convenience, small town feel, school district, all of that. So you're in an area where if you have an open house, people are they're interested, like they want to come to the area. I, Open houses don't work in all neighborhoods, but Keller, I
Right.
can see why it would because it's
Well,
definitely
like I said, it was just something we tried. It was just an idea my wife had, and I said, you know what, I'll go out there on a Saturday and do it. And
yeah,
we had people show
yeah,
up.
and you can be doing stuff while you're there. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
be productive with the time. Now, how about financing? How did financing work? How did you do those? Did you do the traditional purchase, 80% loan, or how'd you do it?
Yeah, we on the first two houses we went through a bank and we did 25% down on each house. And then that'll be the challenge as we grow is, after the banks, then you gotta start doing other things and get connected with other people. But yeah, we did the traditional 30-year fixed loan on the first two.
Yeah. I know it's kind of frustrating because you're like, you got to bring 20% to close, like, and then you're going to do anything. So after a while, your money runs out. Like
Right.
my money wallet's not as deep as some people's, but I wish
Well,
I
you
could
can,
go out and
I
buy like
mean,
crazy.
X dollars, you can only do so many deals. I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can only buy so many houses if you're putting
Exactly.
20% down.
Right. Exactly.
So
Um, so where do you see yourself in 5 years?
hopefully owning 5 to 10 houses.
Five to
We'll
10.
see.
That's all?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do more than that. About two in
Well,
your first
one a
year.
year, two a year. My goal is to do one a year. We'll just maybe we can get two a year in there. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, you're
I would
gonna
love to own more, but I'm
well,
also a
you
little bit more conservative. I don't want to extend myself too far.
right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a couple of books. What would you say are some of the things that you did to prepare yourself for getting your first rentals and then actually owning them, like books, blogs, uh, videos or anybody you follow? Is there any groups that you meet in?
Uh, the book that one of the books I read was Small Pockets or Big Pockets. I can't remember the name of it. That was one that they mentioned. I did do some looking on there. It's a website or a blog where you can ask questions and
Right,
stuff.
bigger pockets. Bigger pockets is
Bigger Pockets,
a
yeah,
good
excuse me, Bigger
resource. Yeah.
Pockets. But that, a couple books actually mentioned that.
Hmm.
So that's what got me looking at it is because multiple books mentioned it. So I started looking at that. But mainly it was just videos, reading, and then honestly just hiring the right people to talk to, like uh, a lawyer to just help me draft my first lease. You don't need that.
Hmm.
But when you're going into it brand new, it's like, well, I mean, you can go on Google and get a lease, or you can talk to somebody that actually goes through it with you and knows what and shows you every paragraph and why it's there. And I mean, that was helpful for me.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, now I'm just thinking about this offhand because you're new, you jumped into it. What is there anybody that's listening, and let's say they've got, let's say $50,000, say earmarked for investing. Is there any reason that you wouldn't advise buying a rental property?
No,
Yeah.
it was freeing, and for me, it was exhilarating. It's that finding that next deal. Even the first one, it's taking control of your life. It is scary because it's like, hey, if I don't get a tenant in here, I'm gonna have to be paying this. But I think the biggest fear is not being able to find a tenant. I will tell you that, even if we had to wait a few months, my anxiety wasn't that bad. We found tenants right away, and I
Mhm.
just think there's more people looking to rent than people understand, and not just in Keller. I think everywhere.
Yeah, I think the culture has shifted a little bit in the last 5 years. I think what some of the things that play to our advantage, especially with yours being you're in I'm going to say a premium area, is historically, people didn't rent premium houses as much because they were like, oh, I'm going to buy. But I think now we live in an environment where people are more transient. So they may live in an area for 5 years, but like, I don't know if I want to buy right now. Interest rates are at 7%. And then so they'll end up renting. And they're like, well, if I buy now and I'm probably going to get a promotion or transferred in 3 years for this corporate job, I don't know
Right.
what it's gonna be like when I go to move. I don't know if I'll be able to sell it. I don't want to be upside down. So what they end up doing is they rent and they do other
Yep.
things for their retirement.
Right.
I don't know if that's good or bad for them, but it works out for us.
Yeah, I mentioned this to you. The two tenants I have are both business owners. So I don't know what the reasoning is for them, but yeah, it might just be to, in case the business moves, they move.
Yeah. So that's a good question on their business owners. Did you worry about what kind of business they're in?
No, because we use the software to do credit checks on all of them and their income, and they've had it for multiple years. So when
Yeah.
we vetted them, we were comfortable signing that lease with them. It wasn't like they started a business like us last year. I'd be
Right.
hesitant to do business with myself if I saw
Yeah.
it was just started last year, but no, they've been around.
Good. And how did you find your tenants? You said open house? Or is that how you found them?
Yeah, well, it's we list on the websites, Zillow, Realtor, and then we did an open house and we posted that on Zillow. So like when people are looking at it, they would either show up. We had two people zoom in to the open house that weren't
That's
here
cool.
and were moving here. So I was able to show them and walk them the property, even though I could have done that without an open house, but they wanted to do it during the open house.
Now, and you bring up a good point. That's like I guess you'd call it problem solving, but I think that's where you would stand out because not everybody does that. And there are so many people that are moving and they're like, they know that they kind of know where they want to live, but we
Yeah,
we're big on like video tours or really good photos because there's so many people that move and they do applications and everything with sight unseen.
right.
So by doing that video,
My second
it
tenant
felt more
was sight
comfortable.
unseen. It was
Yeah.
literally just a Zoom call, and then they signed the lease, DocuSign, and then they were moving in a month later. I mean, they did not see the house until they moved in.
Yeah. And were they happy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you do
Yes.
anything for them when they moved in? Like, did you?
Yeah. We do when they move in, we give them gift baskets and just but them being new to the area, we gave them a list of places that we've been, restaurants.
Yeah.
They had a dog, so places we bring our dog. Just because they're new, we give them a list of things that they could try. Not saying they'd like it, but it's what we use.
That's a good point. So I think, especially with you knowing your market, like you're in this specific area, and with mine, they're all over the place. So it'd be hard for me
Right.
to do, oh, we'll try this restaurant. But with you owning your market, you can do a really good setup where you're like, hey, here's the 5 best restaurants in the area, and here's the phone number to get this turned on and this turned on, and all you can really put a nice little new tenant package together that's like welcome to the neighborhood, which is huge. And you set it up once and it's done. I think Hostify is who I use for my Airbnb, and
Okay.
it's just a neat, like, this is, how everything works in the area or whatever. Here's the parks in the town. There's a lot that goes into that first move-in experience because I'm a big believer in how you set that experience up at the very beginning is how it's going to progress throughout their term. So if you
Right.
have a great move-in experience, clean house, the care package that you mentioned, hey,
Yep.
here's the restaurants, maybe here's a gift card to oh, gifts, grifts, or whatever for little knickknacks, fun stuff. Those
Yep.
are things that they're going to remember, and it's going to give them this good feel when they go into the house, and they're going to have that good feel when they go in. As opposed to somebody that doesn't do that, you're really risking that whatever because you don't know what that first feel is going to be. Like, is it
Right.
oh, there's paint peeling on this door, and all of a sudden that sets them off to where they just over criticize everything, and all of a sudden now you got a tenant that thinks you're a slumlord, and it just that's not the case. It's just that was their
Right.
initial
Well, and the
their
way I
first
see it too is
impression.
we're
Yeah,
still small, but I put myself in their shoes, and it's like if I was walking into a rental, well, how would I want to be treated? It goes back to that. Like I know we're a business, but that personal touch just goes so far because you're not just AI. You are
mhm,
a person, and you're running a business, and there's people living there.
yeah,
So it becomes that like when they call me, I want it to be personable. I want to do business, but I want to also make that connection that hey, we're all human,
and that is
and they're living
important.
in my community, so I want them to appreciate the
Yeah.
community too.
And it's important for a tenant to see you as a person, not as a corporation or evil landlord.
Right.
And so that's a challenge that I always have. We manage about 1,200 houses. So it's very easy for somebody to say, oh, you're just this big company. Well, we're not. And that's why I focus so heavy on our new tenant experience. You know, you're going to deal with Naomi at first, then you're going to talk to Darla, and she's going to walk through everything with you about how it goes. So there's a real touchy-feely situation, and then they're going to walk into their new home, and there's a care package, and we've already spot checked it, make sure everything's clean. So we're trying to take that corporate feel away and put more of the family feel in. It's
Yeah, you're
hard.
giving that
You're
personal
able to do it.
touch. You're giving it that personal touch, and people appreciate that.
So going forward, what's your next step? I know you want to buy one a year, but like, what's your next step? This is 2025 now. You gotta get another one.
Well, the next step is buying as many as I can and just keep that engine rolling. The more I can accumulate, now the way I see it is the more I can accumulate now, we're playing the appreciation game. If I'm buying number 10 in year 10, then that doesn't give me as much time for that appreciation if I'm doing the 20-year plan.
Mhm.
So if I can buy all 10 today, that's actually better. Even
Yeah.
if I'm buying them high, that's a 20-year waiting period versus a 10-year waiting period if I buy my 10th in the 10th year.
Have you Excel spreadsheeted that on how that all works out?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
figured.
have an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, I have Excel spreadsheets for models. As the year gets over, I'll put in all the costs and I can actually see my ROI and my yield as I go along. So there's the initial model of like projected, and then
Mhm.
every year I can see how I'm doing. And then you and I were talking just a few days ago, once I get to 5 or 10 houses, I'm going to be able to see if I have any duds
Yeah,
or not, maybe not duds, but I know we're the ones that are performing the best.
yeah.
And maybe I offload the ones that aren't performing as well, or trade up or down or whatever.
Yeah, I think we talked about return on equity, ROE, which a lot of people don't think about. And
Right.
the way I tell it to people is like that the equity that you have in your home doesn't impact your appreciation on the property. So the equity you have in your home, as you get more and more equity in the property, and that's a higher percentage of the value, that reduces your return on your equity. So the less money you have in a property, the better sometimes. So some
Yes.
of the financial analysts will get in there and say, hey, you don't want that debt equity. You want to pull that out one way or the other. There's 10 or there's 1031 exchanges, there's cash out
Yep.
refis, there's just different things you do to pull that equity and then go buy another one so that that same money is now working on another property for you at the same
Right.
pace. So now you're doubling your appreciation in that period of time. So that was just something that I read a really good book. It's actually written by a Keller guy who uh, Robert Helms.
Okay.
It's out of print right now, and I'm trying to think of the name of the book, but I read his book and it talked about managing your equity in your properties, not just buying the houses and depreciating it, like it was managing the equity in your property. And they used a really good example of, I think it was an apartment complex that his father, Bob Helms, bought, and he's passed away recently, but he's a really neat guy. And he was an engineer. He bought an apartment complex, and the apartment complex, he had it for all these years, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And then he just kept paying down the mortgage and had this bank, and he sold it and made a lot of money. But then he thought about it and he looked back, he's like, man, if I would have sold it after 7 years and reinvested it and taken that equity and did the 20% down payment on the next properties, I would have been way farther down the road, like as far as financially wealthy. And so that just opened up my eyes and like, man, I need to actually manage my equity, not just the property. So that was something that was very interesting to me. I'll have to pull that book up. I'll email you the link to it. It's
Yeah,
out
I'd
of
love to read
print,
it.
but it's and you may want to do on Audible because I think the physical book is really, really expensive. I think I gave it to one of our neighbors, uh,
Okay.
my physical copy, but it's worth reading. And Robert Helms is a very smart guy. He actually tours the country with Robert Kiyosaki and that whole Rich Dad Poor Dad group. So that's another book that I'm a big fan of is anything Robert Kiyosaki's written. He's got some really good books on that.
Yep. Yeah, I would think I'm pretty sure I read that in college. You're talking about Poor Dad, Rich Dad,
Yeah,
or Rich
Rich
Dad,
Dad
Poor
Poor
Dad.
Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that and Cash Flow Quadrant. My son just turned 16 on Monday this week, and so one of the things that he's got to read books. Like if he doesn't have a job, he has still responsibilities. One's very active in school, keeps the grades up, does all the band stuff, does all the things he's supposed to be doing. But I'm like, if you can't figure in a job, you're going to have to do certain things. One of those is read books that I think are beneficial to his development
Well, I
academically.
love that. The
Knowledge.
more knowledge you can instill into
Yeah,
them young, the better off they are.
yeah. So yeah, we got a car. that he's going to be able to use. And I let him pick out the color of the car after he read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and I quizzed him on what he thought of it and the logic of it. And so that was kind of the reward on that. Now it's an electric vehicle, so he has to have it charged. I'm like, well, if you want to have it charged, you're gonna have to read books, and we're gonna have to talk about them, and like let's go over the what all in that book, and show me you got some value out of reading it. So that's kind of
Right.
my logic on that. When he was a little
Oh,
kid, he was a guy that would create his own little for rent signs, and he would hold them up next to the street when we were at a house for showing it. When back this was 13 years, well, this yeah, probably 13 years ago when he was started
and
doing
see that I love that because it's building that it's family time and business in one. I love that. I couldn't bring my son to the corporate office. I mean, I could, but I get a lot of eyes.
it. Yeah, and then what's he gonna like gross
Yeah,
margin guy? Like, what
yeah,
you gonna enjoy that? I don't know.
no,
We had art, so I bought and sold and moved on. But I had one house that I bought the month he was born. It was March of 2009. Bought it in Watauga, not too far away from Keller. And I bought that thing for, looking back, peanuts. But with that house, that what we called that Mason's college house. And so I probably talked about this in previous podcasts, but with that was his college house. And so when I bought it, knowing that the money that this thing generated or became worth, that's what we're going to use to pay for his college. And so far, it's kind of worked out. But like, that was his thing. So we'd go, every once in a while, we'd go to this Mexican restaurant, Fresco's, down off 377. We'd eat there, and then when it was better, and we'd drive by Mason's college house. And so we'd point out, like, Mason, there's your college house. And he's like, oh, and then, after doing that a few times, he's like, well, I want to go to my house. Well, Mason, this is a really good coaching opportunities. Like, Mason, that's uh, that house is earmarked and dedicated to pay for your college. And how we do that is we have tenants in there that pay us to live in that house. So we don't get to go in the house, but they pay us for the right to live there. And that money that house generates is what's going to pay for you to go to college. And so that was a teaching moment for him, and that's when I think and he was little. I mean, he was little. He was in a car seat when he did that. So that
yep,
he really understands how you have to think of way out in the future. You have to think about, you know, uh, investing, and then the power of it. And, at the same time, we're providing a great home for somebody to live in.
right, yeah, yeah. My son's 3, and he's learning that concept already. But I
Yeah.
couldn't teach him that unless he was, physically going to that property with me. And he's like, "This is our house." I said, "Yes, but we're not going to live here." So the same thing. He's 3 years old, and he understands that they provide money to live there. In his mind, he thinks that they're staying there to get out of storms, which they are.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he still gets that we get money for people living there. And
Yeah.
then when I go to work, it might be to go to fix a property, or like that's what he thinks I'm doing every day right now, is going and fixing properties. But
I don't think that.
yeah, but at the end of the day, like, he gets it. He gets to see that, where I could not explain my job to him in corporate finance.
Yeah. And,
you
and
know,
yeah, and I don't know if I mean, all these people have all these jobs, and they're complex, and there's a lot to them. So kids can't relate, they don't understand.
Mhm.
But like with real estate investing, they can, and it's not complex. It's a super old industry. It's not rocket science,
Right.
but you can see how it benefits, and you can get kids excited about it. So
Hmm.
I recruit from A&M students for like summer internships and things of that nature, and they all want to learn about real estate investing. They all want to be their own they want to be their own boss. It's crazy how much demand is out there for students that want to learn how to real estate invest and how to be their own boss.
Right.
Nobody wanted to grow up and be a fixed income broker like me when I
Right.
bought and sold bonds and preferred stocks for people. Like, that wasn't something that kids
Right.
wanted to know. And so, but now I'm in property management. Nobody ever thinks about that either. But owning real estate, that's a popular thing. So yeah.
That's very
Anyway,
cool. Yeah, my dad. When my dad grew up in the working Land O'Lakes for 30 years, he would take me to the plant and the warehouse. End of the day, I knew he worked there, but I didn't know what he did. I mean, when I was young, I thought the plant was cool to go play hide and seek in, but I had no idea what my dad was doing there. He was managing it, so it's just a different ballgame. Like, you can't grasp that when you're young.
yeah, well, that's cool. Well, what advice do you have for people that are?
Don't be afraid to do it. I mean, to just pull the trigger. I was talking to you a few days ago at analysis paralysis. I was there for a year,
Mhm.
where I was just like, oh, this isn't the right deal. The numbers don't work out, or at the end of the day, it's like, well, if the numbers look like they're going to work, just give it a try. You have to just give it that try. And if the house doesn't work, the worst thing that can happen is you sell it and you take a little bit of a loss. You're not up a creek, hopefully, but you got to take that risk.
What I tell people when they're talking about buying houses, I'm like, hey, you can put your money in the Tesla stock. It went down a lot recently. Or you can put it into this and it may go up or down. But a house, like it's not going to zero. Nobody's going to air up the tires on your house and steal it. It's there. It's got title insurance. It's not going anywhere. And if it falls down, blows over, storm comes through, knocks it out, like hopefully nobody gets hurt. But when it comes down to it, it's insured. So it's getting paid for. So the worst case scenario is like I said, it's vacant for a little while, or maybe you have to pay for some repairs here and there. But when you look at the long run, man, it's worth. I bought a house last week and fixed the foundation on it. Over the weekend, copper got stolen. Did I have that in my budget? Like I had some like just what happens like accidental like extra expenses or whatever budgeted in, but I wasn't planning on having to replace copper. But did I get mad? No. I mean, I hate it, but in the long run, that few $1,000s, it's gonna be fine. It'll be fine.
Right.
But you just have to be ready for it. Now, being an Excel spreadsheet guy, before we wrap this up, you had paralysis by analysis for a year, and a lot of people do. In years, nothing. Most engineers, it takes them like a long
My
time.
wife's an engineer.
Yeah, but you get like a lot of people. It takes a long. Like they sit and say, "Oh well, I'll next year." And some of it's discipline, like they just couldn't save up money because they wanted to go do something or whatever, and they just couldn't put the money aside.
Honestly, for me, it was the fear of failure. It was like, what if this doesn't work out? What if, I'm giving up this job to just try something? So for me,
it's hard to get back into that
passed
industry.
up on, I couldn't tell you a year ago how many deals I passed up on that probably would have worked. I just didn't want to jump that gun.
Yeah. And so you didn't give up the paycheck, but can you think about how much money or return you missed out on for that year, either from principal pay down, appreciation, tax benefit?
If I would have started in 2019 when I wanted to, I gave up a lot.
Yeah, you did.
Because of COVID. But I mean, in 2019, that's when that thought crossed my mind is, hey, I should get into real estate. But it wasn't until 2021 when my son was born and COVID had hit. So again, that fear of like, I don't know what's going to happen in the world. I don't know if I want to be buying houses. But that fear, that literally killed me for 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, there's that whole hesitation thing's real, and I get it. But I've never met somebody that said, "Man, I wish I didn't buy as early as I did." Everybody says they should have bought earlier.
Right.
Well, Joseph, I want to thank you so much for coming on because not everybody wants to share their experiences. You didn't really have any negative ones to share or anything, but I really do appreciate you coming on.
Not yet. So knock on wood.
You will, and it'll be like my copper story. Like it just happens. Like, and the more houses you get, the oh well, like it doesn't mean as much.
Right.
The first one, that's the one that you just can't make any big mistakes on. Usually, that's the one that sets like, oh, I don't want to buy anymore, or oh, I'm going to keep buying them. So, but no, I appreciate you, and I'm going to have this come out in a few weeks, and I know it's going to be super popular because everybody wants to know what the hangups are, and like they want to hear people that are just starting out to know that they can relate to you. So,
well, I appreciate having me on, Kyle. I really do.
Yeah, and reach out anytime. And I already gave you some good lenders to talk to, and I think you might be able to change up your buying criteria to where you can open up to buy more quicker. Also,
I would love that. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.